Hello and welcome to another episode of FinTech Focus TV with me, Toby, and today I am delighted to have in the studio Aidan Rushby from Carmoola. Aidan, how you doing?
Lovely to meet you. Thank you for having me.
Listen, absolute pleasure. We've been having a little chat off camera beforehand. I'm very, very pleased to say that a few of my favourite subjects are coming up today. So we're going to be talking about the customer, we're going to be talking about people, we're going to be talking about lots of different things. And actually a great business that you've been sort of founding. I've been doing a bit of recon beforehand and seeing some things there which I was fascinated about. Your 15-minute phone calls, I think, is something which we'll come on to in a minute, I'm sure. Scale up 50 recently, all good news, lots of good things seem to be happening with the business. So loads to get into, I'm looking forward to it. But before we do that, Aidan, tell us a little bit about yourself. I think you've been on a bit of a fintech entrepreneurial journey, etc. And a little bit about the business and what Carmoola do.
Yeah, so I guess I'm a serial entrepreneur. This is my second business now. I built another business and spent about 7 years building that. It was a huge struggle and I learned a huge amount. And it was really, really fortunate, and I don't regret it, and I absolutely loved my time doing that. And yeah, it was a really interesting kind of learning experience. And then Carmoola, I love building customer companies, and for me that is my biggest passion. I really see business as a way of helping people, and I think I have just a particular passion around consumers and really empowering and helping consumers. And Carmoola came out and was born out of kind of my own frustration with going through the process of buying a used car, and then also entrepreneurial insight. I always love to read IPO prospectus and annual reports. I think you can gain so much knowledge and learning from there. And I remember about 3 years ago reading the Kazoo and Kavana at the hype of all the kind of SPAC launches, and just remember thinking, wow, this is a really interesting market. I wasn't convinced about the way they were going about it, but I kind of remember looking at the... And
this is just from looking at pulling the string and looking at a few of these perspectives.
Yeah, I think the best way to be a great entrepreneur is to continually train your brain to come up with ideas. And, I would regularly come up with 10 or 20 ideas a week of businesses and different opportunities from reading and researching and learning, and I still do that now. I just think it's good to train your brain to continually think about things. And I remember reading that thinking, wow, there's just this huge profit pool, and I could see the customer was massively underserved. And I remember one of my friends was building a buy now, pay later solution, and I thought it's really interesting, all these consumers getting educated about download an app, get a budget, and be able to buy, and kind of put the two and two, pattern recognition across the two, put them together, and thought, wow, hang on, there's a really interesting opportunity here to build a much better way for consumers to finance cars, and more importantly, be able to do it cheaper, easier and faster. And we came up with a solution that would be a mobile app that within 60 seconds of downloading, it would give the customer a credit limit or a budget of how much they could buy a used car for. They would just then enter the reg of the car they wanted to buy, and then the app would generate them a virtual card where they could go and buy that car instantly online. There's about 86 online checkouts that you now can buy a used car from, or you can add it to your Google app or wallet, walk into the dealership and buy the car instantly.
Wow.
And this would enable you to bypass a lot of the commission that the dealerships take, as we've obviously all seen recently with all the news about the unfair kind of commission disclosures coming through and customers being ripped off at point of sale finance, and it enables them to do it faster and quicker as well. And yeah, it was I knew nothing about fintech or financial services 3 years ago, or lending.
Is that right?
And yeah, just worked it all out, and yeah, we launched Carmoola in April 2022, and after about 17 months of getting regulatory approval, we built all proprietary tech, so fully automated underwriting, our own loan management system, fully automated collections, and so we eventually launched, and it just went crazy. Day one, I think we've had about 2 million people apply now.
Is that right?
NPS score of 94.
And this is over what period?
We launched about 18 months ago. We launched.
So 18 months, 2 million.
Yeah.
Wow.
And we've lent on.
That's extraordinary. extraordinary, isn't it?
On about 50 million of cars. We've raised about 140 million in debt and equity. And now kind of starting to scale it and getting to a position where things are really kind of playing through. Markets come to us a little bit. Customer trust in dealership point of sale finance is kind of going downhill, and regulatory changes, and we found that customers just love to be empowered by the product. It's not even about cheaper and easier for our car finance. It's the feeling that they get from having the money like secure before they, and the power is almost in their control, and they're able just to go and buy, which is fascinating.
Isn't it?
Super interesting.
I just want to go back about 3 years when you sort of come into this subject, so you say without the sort of fintech background and all this sort of stuff, and you're coming through to that as to where you are now. Was that exactly what you imagined it would be, or?
To be honest with you, like the plan has gone. Like I sometimes look back at my first investment deck and say, is it close to what we kind of envisaged? And it's very, very close. It's one of the very few businesses I think where you've kind of executed against what your expectation was in terms of product strategy. It's very nice every day. Like I remember with my first business, you'd have to rewrite the pitch every time because it wasn't working, and it would become. And I started to. Over time, you start to get quite. It's difficult. Like I had a real fear of failing, and so I wouldn't give up because I really wanted to prove.
This is in the first business.
I really wanted to prove to people that I was right, and I could sort it out.
Sunk cost fallacy.
Exactly. And I went on a bit of a personal journey to get to the point where I was like, actually, no, I've learned so much. Stopping this business doesn't mean I'm a failure or I've failed. It's just like I could take all of this learning and then execute into a new business so much faster. And that's really why I've been able to do it so quickly, I guess, because I did so much groundwork and I really understood what I was doing so much better when I took it into the second one. It's
amazing, isn't it, that those sort of failures can actually be a huge part of the success story from it if you're dealing with it the right way. I think that's amazing to listen to. And you mentioned there about fundraising and various different elements. So you've raised, you say 140 million pounds. That's an incredible sort of piece of that, particularly over the years that you've been talking about doing it as well.
It's been very close shaves in even like some of the numbers were exceptional, like growth numbers. But during, I remember one time I was closing with QED, who are probably the most respected fintech investors out there in the world. I remember closing with them after a summer of a lot of no's, because a lot of VCs, didn't have the foresight to kind of really understand that, with fintech, really the big margins are to be made in lending. But they're now kind of changing their view on that. And I think over the next 10, 20 years, we'll see a growth in the amount of people that invest in lending businesses. But at the time, it wasn't such an attractive sector. I think now that's kind of rapidly changing. But it was incredible. I remember closing, and I remember ringing the partner up at QED, Youssef, is an incredible guy, and it was just like at one point I think it was 3 prime ministers in 3 weeks. And he was reassuring, was like, no, we're investing in this long term. I see this as a real long term kind of business, and I was very grateful of that because that was quite stressful.
But
we were very, in some ways, the best businesses I think always get funded. But it was a challenge. I wouldn't say the equity journey. Interestingly, the equity journey has been challenging. The debt journey has not been so challenging. But we've got some amazing investors, like Venture Friends have been incredibly supportive. Apostle off there is just absolutely fantastic. Amazing support. Every time we've done a round, I think all the investors have continued to follow through.
That's a great testament to everything that's gone after it, isn't it?
But the numbers have been, last year we delivered 500% top line revenue growth.
Wow.
doesn't look like it's slowing down.
Well, not with the numbers you've been talking about. And that's the journey of it, right? When you get that sort of traction early, and it sort of becomes a sort of a snowball, and when you've had that sort of backing towards it at the same sort of stage, it's incredible to see where it goes and where it can go on top of that. And I think, arguably the secret to it all would be what you mentioned at the start there, which is being customer centric. And I mentioned at the top of the show, something which I just caught on your LinkedIn feed, and you mentioned about sort of having a great conversation with someone who'd written out or got in touch with you, and I think any of your customers can spend log in to have 15 minutes with you. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
I mean, a huge undertaking of time on that, but imagine incredibly important parts of it. And, when we were speaking beforehand, you were talking about the concept of product, and I think product development to me is only driven by listening to your customers and having those sort of conversations. So that must be a great investment of time, but a great benefit to you at the same stage as well, right?
Yeah, I think one of the big challenges with lending businesses is that it's very analytical, very data driven, and I think the challenge with that is that you can very easily lose touch with who the customer is, and it's if you think about all the traditional banks, and I think they've lost touch with who the end consumer is. And for me, as a founder leader, I want to continue to keep the customer front of mind, and I don't want to create a company where they feel these people we're out of touch or we're not connected. So for me, enabling customers to have a direct way of reaching out to me, it gives the brand a much more human approach. And to be honest with you, I learned so much. You can just gain so much knowledge from having a 15-minute conversation that is so valuable to the business. You say it's a drain on my time. I look at it and go, these people, it's a massive investment, and the customers give you so many great ideas of how you can develop a business. For me, they inspire me to work harder, to help try and solve some more of their problems, and it enables us to see things that you just don't hear of. One customer saying to me, for example, in the app, I was adding 15 cars, so you can check the car that you're purchasing, and it gives you like a history check of the vehicle. And when he hits 15, he's struggling to scroll down. It's very difficult for you to get that kind of insight without having those conversations, and that means I can then speak to product. We can solve some of those and improve the UI. That's just like a small thing, but customers say, I would love it if you offered car insurance, or I'd love you to do this, and they're like more strategic, interesting, bigger bets that you can kind of think through. I find it really valuable.
How often do people take you up on that? Sort of how many calls
Once
are those?
Or twice a week.
Okay.
Not as many as you'd think, actually. I wish more would.
With 2 million people coming into it.
I wish more people did, because I think it's so rewarding, and I absolutely love it.
Absolutely. So when you talk about the customer piece, this has obviously been something which has been a passion of yours, probably through both businesses, by the sounds of what you're saying. It's not something which creeps up on you, but it's something which becomes an obsession. Tell me some of the sort of key tenements that you've got around the customer and how that's working for you.
So I think it starts with very early on from when we started Carmoola. We thought about our values, how they're I think they're the key building blocks of how you build a great business. And one of our biggest value is deliver wow. So we talk a lot internally about how do we deliver wow. And for us, wow is about doing that piece of work that makes you go, oh, that's incredible. Everyone has that feeling when they see something and they go, oh wow, like extra something special. And so we have this internally. So when somebody does a piece of work, we talk about how do we deliver wow on this? How do we make it even better? And this is the same for customers. And it really empowers people to be able to make great decisions. And so, for example, like our customer support, this runs everywhere in the company, from how we treat our people, how we hire people, how we go about everything. Our value is not, keep the cost super low. Our core strategy is around super high talent density as one of our kind of key elements. But again, it's just about how do you go above and beyond? And this kind of manifests itself that like our customer support in the early days. For example, a customer went to collect a car from a dealership on a Sunday, and he travelled something like 200 miles to this dealership, and the dealership wasn't able to check their account if the money had been transferred. Okay. Because their accounts team don't work on a Sunday. And he really wanted to get the car, so we paid for him to stay the night in a hotel, just so he didn't have to travel another 200 miles back and then back again.
Love that.
But that's like one example, but it can be really small things as well. It's about, one of the key things for us was when we were designing the product, we realized that it was just important for us, if we were going to build a brand in this space where, really build customer loyalty and really kind of build an experience, it was really important to think about what does a negative journey look like? Because in the early days, we knew that we were going to have very tight lending criteria. We couldn't lend to everybody because we would just burn through so much of our equity and the money very, very quickly. So we knew that lots of customers wouldn't be able to be accepted, and that was nothing to do with their credit profile. Sometimes it was just so we spent just as much time probably designing, and our Amy, our director of products, one of the co-founders, spent a long time designing that with a designer using behavioral economics to really kind of create an amazing unsuccessful journey that didn't make people feel like they weren't good enough or they had a problem. It was more, actually, it's Carmoola's responsibility that we can't lend to you today.
Yeah, so this is a really interesting part, isn't it? So that sort of piece there of customer dissatisfaction when they're unsuccessful and that sort of thing, I imagine is, well, it's got a mixture of emotions from embarrassment through to anger, through to desperation, I guess, at various different phases, depending on where you're looking at. And particularly over the last couple of years that you've been talking about as a business, it's not been easy for people to get, credit and have access to all that sort of thing. So that rejection piece, tell me how you look at that sort of play and make that a negative into a positive.
With us, it's about it's a no for now. It's not a no forever. And that could be, a lot of that is to do potentially with like the macro conditions. We need to change our lending criteria. It can be to do with affordability. We really care about the customer outcomes. So we don't want to accept people that may or may not pay. We want to make sure that the customers that come on board can pay. And so...
Makes sense.
And that's about doing things that are right, because ultimately, some lenders, you can accept anyone, but it just comes down to how much you're prepared to charge them for that privilege. And so, we were fully aware of this, so we utilised a lot of techniques, utilising behavioural economics on how to make sure people would be delighted even if they weren't rejected. So, for example, if you are rejected, you can join a waiting list, and we'll let you know when we change our criteria, so you know that you can be accepted as a customer. Or you can, reapply in the future after 30 days. So we did lots of stuff around this to really kind of make sure that even if you were unsuccessful, you could be successful in the future.
It's so interesting. I mean, we were talking before about something I learned from a lady called Linda Muir, who was head of the, I think, experience over at Virgin Airlines. And they came up with a slogan, I think, sort of resonates with a little bit what you've been talking about so far, which was brilliant basics, magic touches, which I've been banging on through in our office for a long, long time. And I think you may have read about Zappos and everything they did before they went to Amazon. Just those little touches that people are doing to make that whole process. And Zappos, I think, all the way through the whole play was about accessibility, was about spending more time rather than less time on service calls, was about making the process of purchase that much easier. And I think companies there who are obsessing about that sort of thing have just got these this amazing runway of progress that you're seeing in the industry. And you said three words which I'm trying to paraphrase in my head earlier on, which was talking about something which was faster. I can't remember exactly what you
faster,
said.
Easier, cheaper.
Yeah, faster, easier, cheaper, right? Which I think if you look at the sort of macro thing of what fintechs are doing well with people, is making processes faster, reducing friction, making it as easy as possible. cheaper is always about cost reduction or productivity gain is something which I talk about as well. So I think that sort of real laser focus that you've had as a business must be contributing to the success of it, right?
Yeah, like I think it's like, how do you build a strategy that aligns with the customer? And we're not doing that. Like, it's a business. Like, we're here to make money. Like I designed the business model so that it would benefit the customer and benefit everybody involved. For us, it's quite simple. Like, we are very focused on automation and data and building a platform to enable that.
Yeah.
That enables us to underwrite the risk much better than anybody else, and therefore reduce our losses on the loans that we do write. And it means that we can run on a very lean head count. There's only 29 people in the company.
Is that right? Wow.
This year we'll grow revenue by 400-500%, and we'll add 3 people.
Wow.
So that's really key. We go direct to the consumer by building a brand that customers love and an experience. That means that we bypass the huge commissions that the dealership and take as part of this. So our cost of acquisition is, way over half that of the traditional lenders, which is, again, driving the business model. We heavily focus on talent density. We're not here to hire loads of people. We hire very, very high talented people and expect them to take on a lot of responsibility. And drive automation is obviously key. It's kind of from there you can see, even to the point in our P&L, we have a very clear line items. This is our top line strategy, and this is how it feeds into the P&L. And it's very, very clear. And I think if you have that clarity of thought from customer, how the value proposition works, how you drive that through into your strategy, into your P&L, then you can build a great business. And simplifying all of that to a very coherent plan, I think, is really key.
So if you look at the two businesses side by side, from take one to take two, there's obviously loads of things there that you picked up from the first from the first enterprise. You've taken in here and you've mentioned things there really clearly about the strategy and some fairly logic. You've obviously thought incredibly deeply about who you want to be, how you want to run things. Talent density is something which I'm obsessed about. Since I think I read during lockdown, I was reading a lot about Amazon and Netflix at the time, and I think Netflix was very strong on talent density, wasn't it?
Yeah.
After the .com bubble, and shrunk the team down to get more productivity out of everyone in the business. So if you're taking the lessons from take one to take two, which has obviously made this an explosively productive business, with the sort of numbers, it's no wonder the VCs are queuing up with what you've just been talking about about now behind it. Tell me what some of those sort of big takeaways would be.
There's loads, if I'm really honest. And I think it comes down to what I talk a lot about is, I think you really need to understand value creation, and I think lots of people get lost in customer experience versus value creation. And for me, I like to understand how are things easier, cheaper, or faster. If you're going to do something, that needs to be key to the plan and the value proposition to the consumer. And then I think is the market that you're addressing big enough? And what I mean by that is, number one, is there enough of a revenue pool in that market that you can go after? Is it substantially big enough? Number two, how hard is it to access that revenue pool? And number three, what will the competition do to potentially stop you accessing that pool? And then you can start layering on top of that then how do you defend those cash flows once you've built them, and how do you kind of in the really simplest of forms, that's what drives value, is long-term cash flows, and then nobody else can access them because of various levels of IP and other bits and pieces. I think a lot of people lose touch with that, and then over time and with experience, you start to learn what good looks like. And it's a really hard thing as a early entrepreneur, or different people may never experience what is good. And I know that's kind of quite an abstract term, but it is really, really critical. For example, we just ran a recruitment process for director of capital markets, and knowing what good looks like makes life really hard
for that individual.
Because I'll give you an example, and it's quite a true example. I won't go into the detail, but we ran a big process where we started recruiting this person before Christmas. We spoke to about 600 people. We ran various interviews, spoke to investors, and we got it down to 2 people, and we didn't quite think we were there, and we didn't think they were like an A player, and so we had to make the hard decision of saying no, we're not going to compromise. We're going to stop. I'm going to start again from the very beginning.
And again with a similar sort of funnel of people, talent. And where did that talent come? I mean, because as you say, look, with a 29-person business, 600 people in a fairly, director of capital markets isn't 2 to a penny in terms of what you're talking about.
We ran the process initially with more organic and through using things like Workable and other things. And then the second time around, we took a much more targeted headhunting approach, because what you learned from that, you understood what you wanted. So and then you were able to be very specific. We need this type of person. So the funnel on the second time wasn't as big, but it was it was a similar process. But to be able to, if you were a younger or a less experienced operator, you would just go, okay, that will do, and you move on. I really believe that's the difference between amazing businesses and okay businesses. And having the discipline and the ability to do that is very, very difficult.
And how do you pitch that sort of value proposition? Because as you say, look, there's one thing wanting to get the top 1% of the industry or top 0.01%.
I tell our investors every board meeting, I go through the strategy and I go through the 5 key line items in that of what our strategy is. Data automation, build a brand customers love, focus on high talent density, build asset management platform. And every time I say the talent density, I go, just to be super clear, this means that we will pay more for talent. I don't I think it is one of the biggest mistakes you can make. Cheap people are expensive.
It's an incredibly poignant way of saying that, isn't it? And I think that whole buy cheap, buy twice piece is an incredibly important part.
And it damages the businesses in so many ways. They then hire average people. The great people in the company go, why on earth am I working with this person? And the whole thing becomes an absolute mess. And one of the things I've really noticed is that over time, when you hire really great people, it becomes like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because everyone in the company is so competitive with each other and their work that the whole thing changes. And you don't need to manage anymore, because they are competing with each other to do incredible work.
I think Amazon were talking about the fact of people who are sort of been in the company for 3, 4, 5 years, basically if they were applying again, they wouldn't be able to get into it with their old CVs, because you're hiring people better than yourself all the time. And that's incredible discipline to be able to do that at the same sort of stage. It takes a sort of egoless business to allow people to come in there and do that.
It's tough.
And the retention's been good with that as well?
Pretty, I think we've moved people on, but that's from more the company wanting to move them on than they wanting to move on themselves.
I think that piece of having that, when you focus on talent density, it becomes that again, that sort of good people know good people want to work with good people. When we do a number of different awards on this every single year, where we're looking at companies to be the top 1% of the industry. And one of the things, which means we talk to our, to all of our customers about that, all of our candidates on our database, and there's a definite theme of various things which they're looking for and what they want to hear and what they want. And I think sometimes people are talking about, obviously the financial side of it, and you've got to be up at the top echelon to get to, the best people. But alongside that, it's, when you're looking at an industry that has, 18-month average tenure, to actually be looking at things there where people can see pathways, futures, be doing interesting and challenging work, but also be around people there where it's just so innovative and informative, and you can learn so much from the people you're around. It must make it
when you know what it looks like and what good looks like, it's very hard to imagine a world where you go back to anything other than that.
Yeah. And tell me what happens next. So you mentioned sort of another year of 500% growth. For the business. You've got a very clear pathway about where you're going. You're sort of on track and on projection with where you're going. So I guess we can look 10 years into the future and know exactly where you'll be. But we'll go a little bit closer. Tell me what's coming up in 2024. What's exciting in the next couple of years? What you mentioned already about various bits of feedback that sort of inform the product and the direction of the product and what you can do with it. Where do you see the business?
We're working at the moment about how do we enable us to offer cheaper rates to more prime customers, which will kind of expand our lending criteria so we can be very competitive across the lending spectrum. Obviously, if rates have risen, it's made it harder to be very competitive on super prime and prime part of the market. So we're working on a big initiative to make that happen, and then really just continue as we're doing, just continue to add more customers and continue to scale. Like that's the key focus. I think more and more customers are now looking for alternative to point of sale or dealership finance. They because of all the scandal,
become more aware of it as well.
They're becoming more aware of it, and they're looking for alternatives, which is kind of feeding very well as like Carmoola is like a really great alternative to that kind of point of sale finance. So we're just more about handling the demand and managing demand through the next 12 months. That's the core kind of focus, really.
You mentioned there as well about sort of 2 million people who've looked at it, etc. over the last couple of years. To get that sort of, I'm always fascinated. In the space of 2-3 years, you've been able to get that sort of traction, that sort of knowledge of a product. Marketing in that sort of B2C world is a really interesting piece, and that must be a core part of your strategy, your world alongside that as well. What are some of the takeaways that you've taken from that?
It's a long game. So you need like multiple channel strategies. So we work with partners like ClearScore, Totally Money, and various other credit aggregators. And then direct, we kind of see it as like a long-term key strategic piece that we're just building out step by step. But we're making really, really good progress on it, actually. And I'm very excited about that side of it.
I guess that awareness is such an important part of it, isn't it, to keep on doing that?
And you have to be patient with it, and it's very complex, especially when you start thinking about attribution and how it all kind of feeds in. But you need investors to be fully aware that this is the strategy. But for me, that is the key equity driver of the business. Like ultimately, owning your own distribution channel, I think it makes businesses very, very valuable. I
think that is an important part there about being upfront with the investors as well at the same sort of time, because so many things I think are difficult where you are dealing with misaligned investors who are looking for different things than other investors and potentially than you as the founder at the same sort of time.
Yeah, I think that's where it goes wrong. I think you have to, ultimately your job as the CEO, founder or leader is to be very clear and be able to articulate your strategy to the investors. They need to buy into that strategy. That's when they invest. And then you need to show how that strategy is working and share that feedback with them. And their job is to question you if the data and the strategy is not working. And I think where it goes wrong is people missell investors on what they are looking to do. They therefore get the wrong investors. Investors come in and then they realize actually this strategy isn't working or there's a problem with it. And then the whole thing, trust is eroded and the whole thing falls apart. And so I think being very clear with what are you trying to achieve, how do you communicate that with the investors, how they then buy into that, and then how do you execute and show them that it's working or it's not working and you need to course correct and change things.
Brilliant. I can't believe how quickly this has gone as a conversation, but I think it's as I say, these are always my favourite sort of episodes where you're there and you're talking through this sort of incredible journey that you've been on, and how you've done it with a focus on talent density and a focus on the customer is so far aligned to what my belief is similar to you, about how you build a great company. So it's been wonderful having you on the show and doing that. So if people want to find out a little bit more and dig into the Carmoola story, get in touch with you, have your 15 minutes with you, etc., etc., what's the best way of them doing that?
Either go to carmoola.co.uk and reach out to us via there, or find me on LinkedIn. I think I'm the only Aidan Rushby on there. You can do that.
Aidan, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on the show.
Really
Thanks for coming on board. And thank you all for watching. We'll see you soon on the next episode of FinTech Focus TV. Thanks a lot.